Hi, I'm James, and in today's Coach's Corner, we're going to be talking about rest times and discussing how long you should rest between sets when strength training. So in our last Coach's Corner, we talked about rep ranges and discussed what rep ranges were best suited to some specific training goals. In today's Coach's Corner, we're going to follow on from that and talk about how long you should rest between sets when working at some of those specific rep ranges and working on some of those training goals. So this table here, this shows us how long we should rest between sets when working at any of these specific training goals and any of these rep ranges. And the specific rest times here are taken directly from a textbook called Essentials of Strength Training and Conditioning, which is a very popular strength and conditioning textbook. So we can see that when our goal is strength, we want to be working in the 1 to 5 rep range and resting for 2 to 5 minutes between sets. And the idea here is that this long rest period is going to allow for a full recovery. So we're going to get a full energy substrate recovery, which is going to allow you to lift heavier loads with each set than you could if we only used short rest periods. And with power, it's a similar story. So power, the emphasis of being fast and explosive. We're going to again use these reps in the 1 to 5 range and a nice long recovery period of 2 to 5 minutes rest between sets. And the idea again is we're going to maximize recovery and we're going to maximize performance of each set. So with power training, getting a full central nervous system recovery is really important, and this long rest period is going to allow that to happen. And if we were to use shorter rest periods with power training, we would start to see a drop off in the speed and power of each repetition. When it comes to hypertrophy or muscle building, the recommendations here are 6 to 12 reps, and according to this table, 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes rest, so significantly shorter rest times. And the theory here is that with the shorter rest times, we would get a greater metabolic stress within the muscle, and the greater the metabolic stress, the greater the hypertrophy stimulus. So that's why we would go for shorter rest periods for hypertrophy work. With muscular endurance, we'd be working at the 12 plus rep range and going with really short rest periods, so short rest periods of around 30 seconds. And the idea here is that the 30 seconds would be an incomplete recovery, so we wouldn't get a full recovery, and this incomplete recovery would promote adaptations that make the muscle more resistant to fatigue, such as improved lactate clearance. Now, this isn't saying that every time we work at 12 or more reps, we should use these short rest periods of 30 seconds. It's just saying that when we're working with the specific goal of improving muscular endurance, we would keep the rest periods short. So if you remember from that previous video we did on rep ranges, we discussed how reps of 12 or more can be really good for building muscle. And if building muscle, if hypertrophy was the goal, then we would want to use longer rest periods. But if the goal was muscular endurance, we're better off keeping those rest periods shorter. So the rest times used for hypertrophy or muscle building strength training has been a topic of great debate in recent years as some researchers investigated the short rest periods that we saw on the previous slide and found some interesting results. So a 2016 study by Schoenfeld et al. Compared training with 1 minute rest between sets and training with 3 minutes rest between sets. And the participants in this study did 3 full body sessions per week, 7 exercises per session, and 8 to 12 reps per exercise. Now this is an interesting study because the rep ranges that were used are very much those hypertrophy rep range, that 8 to 12 reps, and we're comparing the rest times of 1 minute, which is very much what we'd had been prescribed for rest periods with hypertrophy work, and then a 3-minute rest, which is much more like what we would see with heavy strength training. So we would think that the 1 minute rest would outperform the 3-minute rest in terms of muscle building. So what did the results show? So the 3-minute rest group gained significantly more strength as measured by a 1 rep max bench press and 1 rep max back squat. So that's exactly what we'd expect. The longer rest periods built more strength. No significant difference between the groups in terms of muscular endurance. So both groups saw significant improvements in muscular endurance, but no difference between the two, which is not necessarily what we'd expect, because you might think that the shorter rest periods were better for building muscular endurance. But the really surprising result was that the 3-minute rest group gained significantly more muscle than the 1-minute rest group. So that's, as I said, not exactly what we'd expect, because going from that previous table we saw, we'd expect that shorter rest period with a greater metabolic stress to build more muscle, but the longer rest periods were actually better for building muscle. So what's going on here? Well, researchers have concluded that it's not the metabolic stress, but it's actually the volume load, which is the reps times the load, that's the most important factor with hypertrophy, with muscle building. And essentially, the longer rest periods allow for a greater volume load than the shorter rest periods. So if we take 3 sets of 10 as an example, if we were using short rest periods, you might be able to do 10 reps on the first set, but then only 8 on the second set and maybe 7 on the third set for a total of 25 reps. Whereas if we were using longer rest periods, we might be able to get 10 reps on the first set, 10 reps on the second, and 10 reps on the third for a total of 30 reps and a greater total volume. Alternatively, if we wanted to make sure that you could do 10 reps on all 3 sets, if we were using shorter rest periods, we might have to drop the weight on the second and third sets to allow you to get all of the reps in. Whereas if we were using longer rest periods, we'd be able to use a greater average weight across all 3 sets and thus a greater volume load. So again, the researchers have concluded that it's the volume load that's the most important factor in muscle hypertrophy and building muscle, and not the metabolic stress as we once believed. Okay, so to summarize, if your training goal is strength or power or muscle hypertrophy, muscle building, then longer rest periods are superior to shorter rest periods. And if we were going to rewrite the table that we saw in the first slide, we would keep those long rest periods for the strength and power work and increase the hypertrophy rest periods from 30 seconds to 1.5 minutes to 2 to 3 minutes. Now, the only drawback of increasing the rest times is obviously you're going to increase the session length if you increase all the rest times. But that's where techniques such as supersetting can be really useful, as you pair up 2 exercises for different muscle groups, and then while one muscle group is recovering, you're working on a different exercise. But check out our video on supersets for more details on those. And then from a practical point of view, with our compound exercises, our multi-joint exercises, we're going to need to rest for longer. So we're talking about exercises like squats, deadlifts, bench presses, rows, pull-ups. They're more demanding, so will require longer rest periods, whereas our isolation exercises, our single joint exercises, so things like curls, press downs, leg extensions, leg curls, they won't require as much rest. Okay, thanks for watching guys, and we'll see you next time.